The game started as a joke, the kind of nostalgic idea that sounds fun after midnight when everyone is too tired to think clearly and the world feels distant and unreal. But as soon as Tyler Bennett covered his eyes and began counting against the cold concrete wall of the abandoned recreation center, he felt a strange heaviness settle over the air, as if the building itself were listening, waiting for something it had been denied for years. Tyler, Marcus, Jenna, and Louise had broken into the place on a dare, drawn by rumors that it had been shut down after a child disappeared during a birthday party decades earlier. A story they treated like urban legend until they stood inside the decaying gymnasium surrounded by peeling paint and shattered windows that let the moonlight spill across the floor in pale strips. "Ready or not, here I come," Tyler called, forcing a laugh that echoed too loudly in the emptiness, then turned around expecting to see the usual signs of sloppy hiding. A shoe sticking out, a shadow where it shouldn't be. But the room was completely still. He checked behind the bleachers first, then the locker rooms, the echo of his footsteps following him like a second presence. Growing louder the deeper he went into the building. When he pushed open the door to the old swimming pool area, a gust of cold air hit him so sharply he sucked in a breath, the temperature dropping enough that he could see faint fog forming when he exhaled. The drained pool stretched out below like a massive concrete grave, its walls covered in graffiti and dark stains that looked almost black in the dim light. "Guys, this isn't funny," he called, but his voice came back warped, as if something had twisted it before throwing it back at him. A faint giggle drifted up from the deep end. Relief washed through him, assuming one of his friends was trying to scare him, and he climbed down the cracked steps, scanning the shadows until he spotted a small figure crouched near the far wall, knees pulled to chest, head bowed, so long hair covered the face completely. "Jenna," he asked, stepping closer, but the figure didn't respond. The closer he got, the more wrong it felt, the proportions too small, the limbs too thin, the silence too absolute. When he was only a few feet away, the head tilted upward slowly, revealing a face that was not Jenna's, not anyone's, just a pale blur of skin where features should have been, as if someone had tried to erase a person and failed. Tyler stumbled back, heart slamming, and the thing unfolded from its crouch with a jerking motion, joints bending at impossible angles before it sprinted toward the pool wall and climbed straight up without using the steps, disappearing over the edge in seconds. Tyler scrambled after it, desperate to get back to the others, but when he reached the top, the gymnasium beyond was no longer empty. Dozens of figures stood scattered across the floor, all facing away from him, perfectly still, their heights and shapes identical to his friends, yet subtly distorted, limbs too long, heads tilted too far to one side. "Marcus," he whispered, but none of them moved. One by one, their heads turned toward him in perfect synchronization, revealing the same blank, featureless faces. The lights flickered violently, plunging the room into darkness for a split second, and when they returned, the figures were closer, surrounding him in a tightening circle. Tyler ran, crashing through the exit doors into the night, not stopping until he reached the car where Marcus, Jenna, and Louise were already waiting, pale and shaken, insisting they had heard someone else counting after Tyler stopped, a voice deeper and slower repeating the numbers from 1 to 100 long after the game should have ended. They never went back, never spoke of it again. Yet years later, Tyler still wakes some nights to the sound of slow counting coming from inside his closet, a childlike voice whispering, "Ready or not," followed by the soft creak of the door opening a few inches on its own. No one remembers who suggested playing hide and seek in the woods behind Caleb Foster's new house, only that it felt like the perfect way to celebrate the end of summer before everyone left for different colleges. A childish game played one last time for nostalgia's sake, yet the moment Caleb pressed his forehead against the rough bark of the oak tree and began counting, a deep unease settled into his stomach, a sensation that something else had heard the rules and decided to join. The property bordered miles of dense forest in rural Virginia, land that locals warned newcomers not to wander after dark because people had gone missing there over the years, hikers who vanished without tracks, Hunters whose rifles were found leaning against trees with no sign of a struggle. Stories Caleb dismissed as exaggerated folklore until he stood there alone listening to his friend's footsteps scattering through the underbrush, fading too quickly, swallowed by a silence so completed. Felt unnatural. Ready or not, here I come, he shouted when he reached 100, turning around with a forced grin that died instantly as he realized the woods looked different. The familiar trail behind the house gone, replaced by a maze of identical trees stretching in every direction. He laughed nervously, assuming he had turned around without noticing, and started walking, calling out names: Ryan, Sophie, Matt, Lauren, expecting someone to jump out and scare him. But the only response was the distant rustle of leaves that stopped whenever he did, as if something were carefully matching his movements. After nearly 10 minutes, he found the first one, or what he thought was Ryan crouched behind a fallen log, shoulders shaking as if trying not to laugh. "Got you," Caleb said, reaching out to tap him, but the figure froze completely, the shaking stopping mid-motion. Slowly, unnaturally, the head turned toward him, revealing Ryan's face twisted into a wide grin that showed far too many teeth, the eyes unfocused and glassy like a doll's. "You weren't supposed to find me," the figure whispered in a voice that sounded layered, multiple tones speaking at once. Caleb stumbled back, blinking, and in that instant the figure was gone, leaving only empty ground behind the log. Panic began to rise, sharp and choking. Yet he forced himself to keep searching, convinced stress and darkness were playing tricks on him. He found Sophie next, standing between two trees, her back to him, hair hanging limp despite the breeze. Relief surged through him until he called her name, and she didn't respond, didn't move, just stood there facing away. He stepped closer and noticed her feet were hovering inches above the ground. A low humming filled the air, vibrating through his chest, and the trees around them began to creak as if bending inward. Sophie's head snapped backward at an impossible angle until her face was upside down, eyes wide and unblinking, mouth stretching open far beyond what should have been possible. Caleb ran. Branches tore at his arms and face as he crashed blindly through the woods, the humming growing louder, punctuated by the sound of something heavy moving parallel to him just out of sight, snapping twigs with deliberate steps. He burst into a small clearing he didn't recognize and saw all four of his friends standing in a circle with their backs to him, heads bowed, as if in prayer. "Guys," he croaked, hope and dread colliding in his chest. They turned together, movements perfectly synchronized, revealing identical expressions of blank calm, eyes reflecting no light. "You found us," they said in unison, voices overlapping into a single hollow tone. The ground beneath Caleb's feet trembled, the soil cracking open in thin lines that spread outward like a web, and a hand pushed up through the dirt at the center of the circle, gray and skeletal, followed by another and another, dozens of them clawing upward as if something buried alive was trying to escape. Caleb screamed and bolted again, guided only by instinct until he saw the faint glow of his house lights through the trees. He stumbled onto the back lawn and collapsed, sobbing, expecting to hear his friends behind him, but when he looked back the woods were silent and empty. Moments later the back door flew open and his parents rushed out, alarmed by his screams, demanding to know what had happened. Between gasps he told them everything, but their confusion deepened as they insisted no one had come over that night, that Caleb had been alone in his room for hours before suddenly running outside. Desperate, he checked his phone for the messages arranging the game, only to find no record of them, no photos, no contact for Ryan, Sophie, Matt, or Lauren at all, as if they had never existed. In the following weeks, he searched school records, social media, yearbooks, nothing. No one remembered them except him. Sometimes at night, he hears footsteps circling the house, stopping outside his window, followed by a soft chorus of familiar voices whispering, "Ready or not," and he lies frozen in bed, too afraid to look, because deep down he knows the game never ended, and sooner or later they're going to find him again, and this time there won't be anywhere left to hide.